Hi everyone. Thank you so much, Antoine, for being here tonight. And I don't think that we even realize the chance that we have tonight for having such a guy. And what always surprised me is that we can send you like a very long email, and you always take the time to reply back with very interesting insights. So thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
So, and to start, I have a confession to make, because 4 years ago, I had a coffee with Jean, just right here. And at the end of the meeting, he was like, do you know Zenly? And I never heard of it. And he was like, we were raising a 10 million Series A with them. I was like, what? I never heard of them, what the fuck? And then I went online, and I saw your numbers, and I was like, it's still small. And I didn't understand why. And then I had lunch with you, and I remember coming back to the office, and I told my co-founder, I don't know about Zenly, but these two, they're definitely gonna succeed at something. And
Nice.
it really mindfucked me. So we have to give a big credit to Jean, because he saw something that nobody else did in France. So, and I would like to tonight to understand what he saw. So can you tell us a little bit more about the beginning Alloters and what made you clicked? Because there's such a big change between Alloters and Zenly. So did you meet anyone?
We met Jean in the middle. We met great designers, great engineers, and I think that played a lot. The other thing we met is the market. We launched basically a first product called Alertas, who was focused on family safety at a time where sharing your location with someone wasn't okay. It seems very old now, but basically 8 years ago, almost everyone didn't have a picture on LinkedIn because they didn't want their picture to be visible on Google. If you type Ray, people didn't want their picture to be searchable. We were trying to impose share your location back then, which was too early, focused on family safety, had issues with retention. We were consuming a lot of battery. The phones were pretty bad, and we were very bad from an algorithmic standpoint. We spent 2 years doing R&D, basically working on optimizing the real-time, precise, and battery-friendly nature of Zenly. My job back then was to be the guinea pig for my team, so being very serious every single day or close to that. I would be running around the Sentier district with 5 phones in my pockets as the team were testing algorithms. That led to a technology which we had 2 options, either go B2B, had been 4 years of basically eating pasta, no salary, working our asses off on the weekends on doing other things. In my case, I would stop work at 10 p.m. on Fridays, head to Chez Régine, which is a nightclub, organize the parties there, finish at 7 or 8, go to bed, start again on Saturdays, or go B2C. And B2B at the time in France seemed like the route that would pay the fastest and would enable us to basically make a living. So we hired some guy in the US as a business developer, asked him to see everyone who had ever emailed us for technology. We had people in the delivery space, people in the ad space, people in the security space, all interested by the technology. He went around, saw them, gave sales pitches, came back and said, hey, I need a demo version of the app. I'm going to have a hard time convincing them just on my own words. So can you build a small POC, small demo, put it on the App Store so that they can download it easily, and we'll use that to do demos. At the same time, we had left the B2C route open, and we were still thinking that we'd take the technology and bring it back into Alertas. What happened is that little demo that was available on the App Store, which he basically shared to a few people during sales pitches, ended up finding growth by itself because it was solving better than any other product a very simple need of knowing where your friends and family are and what they're doing.
That's great. So I don't know if you noticed, but I think that everybody tonight would be able to repeat that story. And I think the art of storytelling is very important for a founder, and that's great. And I know that everybody in Paris would notice about the story about doing skateboarding in the streets of Paris, killing batteries and stuff like that, and it's really stuck in our head. So that's great. And can you give us a sense of how big Zenly is today, and what's the company vision? Where is going the product?
Sure. So I wish I could share numbers. I can't share numbers because we're part of a larger company that's listed. But what I can say is we're 20 to 30 times bigger than when we joined that bigger company 2.5 years ago. That we're the fastest growing social app in 4 or 5 different markets, including some serious ones. What is the vision today? Being honest, it's very much the same as it was back then. We do 2 things very well, letting you know what your friends are doing that in real time, and then making ways for you to actually end up spending more time with them, whether it's through meeting up, whether it's through conversing on top of these locations, whether it's through, just like this weekend. So this weekend, I was having drinks with Jean and a very famous designer from the US. We're trying to have him join us in Paris. And so we were partying together, had dinner, and then went to have drinks. 4 of our friends joined randomly because they were seeing that we were together in a club in Paris. They didn't tell us, they just popped in. And they chose that club because they knew we were there. They could have gone to 20 other places. So provoking that is still something we try to do.
That's awesome. And you did just another thing, which is you were very serious about recruitment very early on. And going back to the Series A with Jean, can you tell us what happened then? And how did you get to the Series B, and how recruitment was a key part of it?
Series A today seems like it was something that was easy for us. We had raised 10 million out of nowhere. The reality is that it was really hard. And being honest, I think without Jean, we would not have raised Series A, at least not in these proportions. What happened is the product was spreading around VC, inside the VC ecosystem, inside the startup ecosystem, thanks to Jean mostly, and a few others. At some point, we had a few US and UK funds start reaching out. We engaged in discussions too early. We didn't have the numbers, we didn't have the traction they were looking for. At the same time, we started burning more money so that we could grow at the right speed. And Jean basically ended up convincing Xavier and another VC called Ide Invest to co-lead our Series A. At a time where we did not deserve this much money or this much attention. We ended up, I think, using the money probably the right way, making lots of mistakes, but my whole life as an entrepreneur was to just catch up on the extra momentum we had that we were not supposed to have. And it's the same thing with our Series B, where we met Peter Fenton and the Benchmark partners at a time where we had money in the bank. We had just raised Series A. We didn't have the figures that Snap or Instagram had when Benchmark joined them. We just clicked very well with Peter, and he wanted to make sure we didn't end up working with another VC. But the year that followed was just trying to catch up on the milestones we should have hit before actually raising. One of the key things that did help us raise, as you were saying, is the quality of our team. And that happened by repeating the story, trying to be very persuasive about it, and hiring engineers and designers that normally don't join startups at this stage. And I think one of the key things in our secret sauce that enabled us back then to do it is we were hiring freelancers. We were not looking for full-time people. At first, because we just didn't have the money to hire them. But by looking for freelancers, we ended up working with people that would not even respond to a job offer, that could raise their hand and work for Google or Apple the next day. As a freelance, if you pay well, they're ready to come and help you very fast. And we basically bluffed that they were already part of the team when we raised. The reality is, I think Laurent, our CTO, had just signed a few weeks before, and the rest of the team, most of them were freelancers. The days, then the weeks that followed the raise, we hired half of what were our freelancers back then.
Very cool. So basically, you were always saying that you didn't have the numbers when you raised your A and your B, but you were always pulling the future forward and always behaving like a unicorn, I would say. And I remember something that the first time I went to your office, there were like maybe 20 people or something. And I was like, well, how are you so big and how much are you burning? And you were like, our goal is to burn twice that. I was like, wow, how can that be a goal? And that's something I think that you understood very early on, which is always be pulling the future forward as well. So going back to recruitment and the team, you said that you recruited Laurent, and what is very interesting here is that you basically built a technical company without a technical co-founder. So can you tell us a bit more, and did you struggle, or why that choice?
Good question. At first, it was a personal struggle to want to build a tech company and not code myself. Months or two after that, I started to realize that basically, as a CEO that can't code, my job and my co-founder's job, who couldn't code either, Alex, was to become the best at finding resources so that the best engineers could work with us. And so we did focus a lot on, okay, what are the tricks to fundraising? Who are the people we need to know? How do we improve our pitch? How do we do all these things? Because we knew that we didn't have a chance to code it ourselves, so we just probably compensated through pitch.
And going back to that, is it hard to manage a technical team without being a technical co-founder? Because at the end, you are always like the one that will make the decision, even if you're the CTO.
I think it's easier, to be honest. I think it's actually easier because as you grow as a company, you realize that managers shouldn't be the ones taking the decisions. Most of the time, their focus should be sponsoring people, fostering them. And so, because I did not know what they were trying to make me arbitrate on, which leads to more ownership, which leads to better decisions, faster learning, because it means they're making the mistakes and learn on top of that. So looking back, it's probably a blessing. And when you look at the other companies in our space, since we started, I've probably seen, I don't know, 200 startups launch around location sharing. The ones that most of them are founded by former CTOs and engineers, and they probably have a harder time selling the long-term vision or finding the resources to hire a great team.
That's very interesting. And I remember that all the time I would ask you if I should hire a CPO, and you would always tell me no, that I should be the CPO, like a product CEO. So I'd like to know more about that. And was it a key part of your success, and was it the difference between a company like Foursquare or the others, or all the ones who are still trying to do location sharing, and yours?
So if you think of the social space in general, I still haven't met a very successful company in the scale where we're looking at that isn't led by a CEO who is very product or design initially. I have seen countless examples of failures of the opposite, and I've also seen, if you think of Twitter, if you think of Facebook, when their CEO was doing other things, you've seen these companies go the wrong way when the product CEO / the person owning the vision starts doing something else, is either defocused or doing something else, and you always see them come back when that person comes back. So I think it's specific to our space in social. I don't think it's doable to succeed without having, at least in the early days, a CEO that owns the product vision.
Very cool. So today, if we look at Zenly, you have all these emojis that you're using, like all this language. It's very focused for teenagers. And with all that trend going back to privacy, so how do you manage a balance between privacy and location sharing, which is obviously
Sure.
you're not hiding anything, and I think it's even more important when you distribute your product to teenagers.
Sure, definitely. So two things. The first thing that I think is important to state is that we've never sold user data, will never sell user data, and think that belongs to you and should be wholly owned by the user. Putting that stance very clearly at first, I think it's clear. We don't use it as a marketing argument. It's probably the first time I say it out loud. You'll never see me tweet about that. But that's the first base of how we roll, because it's how then the team can do the right interpretations when it comes to engineering or product decisions, where there's always struggles between user benefit and company objective, and making sure users come first each time starts by being very clear about that. Second thing, because we are on location sharing and because we were early, we had to spend a lot of time thinking about what does privacy mean in that context. How are we respectful of the user's privacy, including within his friend group? And how do we make sure that we don't replicate certain things that make sense in public social products that don't have a location component to it? We have a few examples of that, but just opening Zenly and looking at our privacy settings, I think, will show how different we try to be there as well.
Very cool. So today, basically, what are your main KPIs that you look at, and what do you think drives retention and stickiness to your product?
So we look at DAU, the number of daily active users, and how fast it's growing. It's been pretty much the same KPI since the beginning. Paul Graham, who leaded YC back then, gave this, you should be growing 7% every week as a YC company. We've always aimed for 6 every week since the beginning, and that's what you see on dashboards in the office. What was the second part of your question?
So what drives retention and stickiness to your product today?
So the first thing is purpose, and we tend to forget that. We see, especially in France, very often successes that grow before there's a real understanding of the core product primitives and what's the purpose of the product. So being very clear at first on what value do you want to bring, what's your core primitive, what's your core narrative, focusing on that, and then building a product and looking for retention and then looking for growth, I think is probably the way to grow, at least it's the one we followed. I've seen countless examples of the opposite. Basically, product founders naturally focused around growth first and retention second. And while that sometimes works, most often it doesn't lead to the successes that you can expect. So retention is probably the most important thing for us since the beginning. We focused mostly on activation, so the user's first few hours, I would say 80% of the job happens there. And it encompasses both within the product and what you see on the App Store or within text messages that users share to each other, because it is what's put in the user's mind there that leads to the right actions during onboarding. Very cool.
So basically, Zenly is mostly used by teenagers, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's Jeremy Liu, a partner at Lightspeed, that said that to build basically the next Snapchat, you have to focus on 13 to 17 teenagers, mostly women, because they predict the next trend of social consumer. And you're 33, right? So how do you build for a generation that you're not part of? And how do you mix the numbers, the stickiness and the retention and stuff like that with qualitative data? So
So two things. One is going to seem very obvious today, but wasn't as obvious when we started. Everyone in the team has access to our analytics solution, Amplitude, and basically everyone uses it every week. Out of 50 people today at Zenly, there is more than 40 that use it every week. So making sure that every single person in the room understands what users are doing thanks to analytics is key, and most often doesn't happen this way. In most companies, it will be either designers or product managers spending their time on analytics. Second thing is we spend time with users every week or close to that. One of the key things we did to improve our onboarding, and that we continue to do today, is spending time outside the office. One of the tricks that works well is Wednesdays, where we'll go to a well-known fast food chain. There's always tons and tons of students in front. One of us will pay for their lunch and we'll tell them, hey, I'll do the line, the 15 minutes you would normally spend in the line. I'll do it for you and I'll pay your Big Mac. In exchange, the 15 minutes that you have, please test our app. And we'll be filming that just to make sure we understand everything that happens. We do it there and not in the office, because during lunch after school, they are getting snaps every 20 seconds. So the onboarding does not happen in Zenly the whole time. They will switch to 20 other apps, will snap back, and the onboarding has to be stable to that. So there's this whole variety of exogenous factors that you don't have when you do classic user tests in-house. Seems very simple, very stupid. To this day, I think it's probably one of our most important secrets. Not a secret anymore, but...
and I know that you focus a lot on user behavior and psychology. Can you tell us a little bit more about this product mindset at Snap and Zenly, and how psychology plays a big role into that?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we are all social creators, and we hire a product to do a certain job. In the social sphere, it's rarely a first-degree job. You don't actually open Zenly to just see a pin on the map and locate a contact. You open Zenly because some of your friends have joined you on a Saturday in a club out of nowhere, and you had a great party thanks to that. And understanding all these second-degree implications to what we do, making sure they can exist, and you can rebound on them, provoking more emotions, so provoking delight with lots of little details, is I think the difference between successful social products and less successful. If we look at just the social market, if you ask any teen in France what company they want to work for later on, they'll tell you Snap. And why is that? Because Evan puts a ton of efforts into the little delights that will create basically love from a user. We try to do the same thing with Zenly. Yeah,
I saw you tweeted retweet, basically tweets from Japanese people, and I think you have a lot of users in Asia. And I would love to know why Asia, why Japan, why Korea, why your growth. I think your growth is much higher in Asia, correct? And is it related to a local culture thing?
So are we bigger in Asia than elsewhere? That's true today, although we have product market fit everywhere and are growing pretty much everywhere. What happened, I think, is Asia, especially Japan, the address system is very complicated, and so being able to just see where your friend is on the map and follow your phone to him helps. The other thing is, if you think of Tokyo, where we blew up first, people live in smaller spaces. There's multiple generations together in the same apartment, and so if you want to have a social life, it's not going to happen at home like it does in Europe or in the US. And so having a tool that basically helps you curate the social activity happening within your friends seeing 3 friends at the mall, 4 friends in this bar, and 2 friends playing soccer, and being able to choose based on that solves an even stronger need at first for them. So that's how we explain it. We've been there a few times. We continue to do that, and we'll probably have an office over there soon. When you think of what we do overall, which is telling you where your people are, whether it's family or friends, letting you infer based on what you know about them, what they're doing, and allowing you to talk on top of that. In the end, it's a very primary and universal need. Every single person in this room, probably half of us have a text message from someone we live with asking, when are you coming home? And that's true in Japan, that's true in Europe, that's true in the US. So we were better at first at explaining that probably over there than here. But in the end, I think we just solve a need that's universal and needed everywhere.
So it feels like Asian users are much more comfortable sharing their location. And do you know why? So what happened? What created that spark for that growth? And can you replicate it anywhere else?
I mean, the first thing is internally we don't generalize talking about Asian users, because when we look at the different countries, there's very different behaviors. If you think of Japan versus South Korea versus Taiwan versus China, they will have totally different even cultures around privacy. China, yes, less a question around is it a subject to share my location with others. In Japan and South Korea, different story. They, depending on the communities we talk about, they basically have the same privacy thinking that we have in France. What was the end of the question? Sorry.
Can you replicate that growth somewhere else?
Sure.
And do you know what happened? What created that spark there?
Okay, yeah. So that's what we try to do every day. One of the key things is Zenly will blow up naturally within subgroups. One of the early subgroups was probably the family, where the whole staff of the family and their friends started having Zenly. In certain countries, these subgroups will be huge. And a recent example of that is Taiwan, where a class of Japanese students, we had basically no users a year and a half ago in Taiwan. A class of Japanese students went on an exchange program. They arrived early January. Mid-January, they had convinced the rest of their class to install the app. 5-6 days later, the whole university, and a few weeks later, big chunk of 15s to 20 years old in Taiwan. This, we're still trying to learn how to replicate ourselves. And if we had the recipe, we'd probably be bigger than Facebook today. We are finding success by being very clear about what Zenly offers as a purpose, and making sure we adapt that to each geography. If you think, for example, of the US, teens are free when they reach their 16, 17 years old. When you think of Paris, teens have the liberty of movement when they're much younger than that, because we have public transportation. You don't depend on a driving license to actually move around and go see friends. And so we'll adapt our targets to these kind of cultural differences.
So talking about Facebook, so how do you handle copycats? Because I know that people at Facebook are trying to replicate that as well. And is it because you have a very unique social graph? And what I mean by that is Zenly like like a smaller subset of Snap, which is, I think Snap is like your real friends or best friends, and like Zenly would be like your besties, like maybe your 5 best. Is it because you have this very unique graph that Facebook that will never have?
So the first thing is, can't respond on the very first question. A part that we actually look forward to more competition. And whether it's from them or from other companies in the space, we think the whole vertical could be growing faster. Within that vertical, because we've had this awesome team for 8 years now, whether it's design, whether it's engineering, whether it's marketing, we think we basically have the best team on this subject. And so long term, as long as we stay focused, continue to drive innovation, we feel very secure in our space. Would love more companies to evangelize our use cases. And when we saw Google Maps add location sharing, when we saw WhatsApp add location sharing, when we see Apple pre-installing their own app on our iPhones, we actually grow faster following that, because in the end, users will optimize for the best product, and on this market today, it's Zenly's. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it kind of does. And talking about Apple, so I don't know if anybody else knows about that, but basically in the latest iOS version, it's getting harder and harder to ask for always on location sharing with iOS. So how do you handle that, and is it hurting your growth, or?
So it's not hurting our growth. And how do we handle it? We just go more often to McDonald's on Wednesdays. Being very serious, we've had team members every Wednesday at McDonald's since June. Apple is a company we've been working with for now 8 years, and so it has a size today which sometimes means blind spots for them. We just make sure they're aware of the impact of these changes. I think in the end they're very supportive of what we're doing. They look forward to more competition in the social space. They look forward to more good examples in Europe, and also good social companies in Europe, which we kind of lack today. And so I'm fairly confident on the long-term future there.
So going forward, so basically you built a social consumer app in France. So you proved a lot of people wrong because you actually did it. You even raised Series A and Series B, and the company stayed in Paris, right? And so I would like to know what's changed after the acquisition with Snapchat. So what were the conditions, basically?
So the exact conditions, I'm going to have a hard
So
time.
Are you happy today?
I'm very happy, very happy. No, what changed, being honest, not much. We still are a team in Paris, mostly run by locals. We basically have a bigger brother that helps us when we need, if I try to summarize. And on a few topics, they've helped us become best in class. I think one of these is privacy. Same thing, Snap is fairly discreet historically on these subjects, but a lot of the concepts we hear about today, whether we talk about privacy by design, whether we talk about user control, whether we talk about data retention and how if a user stops being active, it's probably a good practice to at some point delete their data. Well, all these things, Evan and more largely the rest of their team have helped us learn faster. So if we think of their impact, I would say impact on our culture around privacy, security, and then a lot of things that big companies have means to handle better. There's certain things where it is an unfair advantage to be big and fat. We're here to try to, as startups, most often to disrupt that. So it's been interesting to be on the other side and to actually think, okay, now that we're part of this big group, what are the things that can be a key success advantage for us? And some of these Snap is helping us with.
So it feels like you even have more resources for your vision and your goal. So would you say that you have the same goal as before, which is having 1 billion users? And how Snap helps you about that for growth? Are you using Snap as well as a distribution channel as well, or how does it work?
So today there's no product integrations, no link between Snap and Zenly. and we're still growing very fast without. We did not communicate following us joining, so a lot of people expected us to either bring our technology into Snap or to have Snap help Zenly grow in some product way. Not the case at this point, and short-term future, I don't think that's on our plans. We are doing something with Zenly, and my team is doing something that, to my knowledge, hasn't been done in Europe in a long time. We can't share numbers, but if I don't make mistakes, I think the last social network built in Europe, conceived in Europe, at our scale, is probably Skype 15 years ago. And Snap is basically, Evan in general are helping us do that, giving us more chances than we would on our own. Do we have more means? I don't have to fundraise every year. So in that sense, yes, I win every 3 months every year without having to fundraise. Apart from that, we had been very lucky and had, thanks to Jean, thanks to Xavier, thanks to Peter Fenton with Benchmark, resources were never a real problem for us.
So, and do you have any pressure from Snap to monetize the product yet?
No, not at all. No.
And do you have any plan to monetize the product?
To monetize?
Yeah.
No, the short term probably not. In the same way that we would probably be dead if we had tried to monetize 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago. We think this vertical, basically sharing your location with your friends, knowing where they are, spending more time with them, is such a universal and primary need that there will be billions of people using one of the apps that power that as a daily app in the next 3 to 5 years. Today we have one of the best technologies, probably the best product out there on this market. So our only goal is to make sure this little company out of Paris is the one that everyone has on their phone.
And so I get what's changed for the company. So I guess not much. You even get more resources and you're even more focused on your problem and your product. But what's changed for you? Because it feels like, so when I look at Zenly, you're always like at the office, even at 10 in the evening. So I'm like, so I was like, this guy is rich now, I can say, right? So that's a question for Moussama. So how does it feel to be rich? And after the acquisition, and do you still have the same obsession when you wake up in the morning, going to work, and always tackling the same issue?
So making money honestly wasn't an end in itself for us. At first, just buying the freedom was one thing, and we did that long time before actually joining Snap. When you raise Series A, when you raise Series B, you start having a decent salary, and so it's not a subsistence question anymore. Do we still work a lot? Yeah, because we're just very driven by our purpose. We all have the same goal, and so in the same way that it's fairly unique, but we joined Snap 2.5 years ago. I think 90% of the team is still with us, which is fairly unique. One of the underlying reasons to that is that when we joined because we wanted to maximize our chances. We didn't join because we needed to find cash or find the support we didn't have otherwise. We joined while having a lot of growth, and we had just raised Series B, so we had a lot of money in the bank. We just felt that having the support of Evan and more largely Snap as a unique independent player in Europe would give us more chances to actually reach these billions of users we are after. And to date, I think it's proved right.
That's amazing because you're like always working 24/7, even after the acquisition. And I think that would be maybe the difference between you and the other founders that try to tackle this issue. Is like you're really sharp focus on your issue, on your problem and your product, and you never, you're never done basically working on it. And I'm not sure if we still have time. Or, yeah. So a lot of people here are founders, and I guess that they want to know if they can replicate your success and if there can be another Snapchat, because basically what people say in the Silicon Valley is that between 1 million DAU and 100 million DAU, you're basically in a dead zone, and no one will fund you because there was no success after Snap, except Zenly now. So how do you see, do you think that we can still launch a social product today and scale to 100 million users?
Definitely, I would not be working this much. Otherwise, we're not at 100 million yet. But is the recipe the same as it was 5-7 years ago? Probably not. And is it harder today? If you look at the raw data, yes. Snap is basically the only social product with mass adoption to have emerged at scale in the last 5 years, until hopefully Zenly reaches that point too, and then we'll say Zenly is the last one. What changed when these products, when you think of the generation right before, so Pinterest, Twitter, and Facebook in some way, emerged, they were on a new ecosystem. People were buying phones so that they could download apps. Apple was advertising the iPhone by doing campaigns called "There's an app for that." Today it's a different world. We're all trying to delete apps that we have on our phone. We're trying to store them in different folders and find new ways to store even more apps. So the market has gone from a burgeoning market where doing a great job from a product standpoint was enough to grow, to a point where we're in a mature and saturated market. And if you think of other mature and saturated markets, questions around the brand, around marketing, around distribution become essential. And I think we're just on the verge of seeing that. We had an example very recently with TikTok imposing a global social product through marketing and spending. If you asked Coca-Cola's CMO to launch a new soda, he would probably do exactly what TikTok did in the last 2-3 years. And so ourselves as social product founders, we now need to be great there as well. It's one of the key things that I think is different. Product in itself is not enough anymore. And I think that will lead to actually a new wave and a lot of opportunities, because when you have former generation of companies which weren't built to put marketing at the center, it's going to be hard for them to defend on that front.
So Zenly is one of the biggest success in France ever in the tech space, and still it's harder and harder to raise fund for building a B2C product. VCs would be a lot more comfortable investing in B2B. So it's getting harder and harder to raise funds, and it's getting harder and harder to grow as well. And you're saying basically that we cannot grow anymore without spending money into ads. So should we build a paid product from the first days?
So there's two things. The first thing is I think it's still possible to find funding, and probably even more than it was when we started. The initial checks we would get were 20K checks, 50K checks, and we got probably 15 of them through lunches over 3 years before being able to raise Series A. I think that's still doable. The recipe there is fairly simple. Find a clear product primitive and narrative. Read Jean's Medium post about it, and then launch that product. Look at your retention. If your retention is good enough, go see Jean and tell him about it, and he'll give you money. And if the stage afterwards other VCs don't give you money, Jean will call them and shout on them and tell them, hey, you should be doing this, it's your job. The other thing is we're seeing a new breed of VCs. I'm thinking of François at Alven as an example, that not only are supportive of social startups, but are actually looking for more. In the same way, the tier 1 VCs, like we used to call them in London, which used to be very focused on SaaS and any other business in social, because that was fairly rare in Europe, are now looking at it. So I think that helps a lot. The other thing is, should they be monetizing earlier? I'm seeing, and we have a few very good examples. For the ones that haven't tested, you should install Mojo, which is probably the best example, or Yubo, both companies built out of Paris, with founders that have monetized very early and monetized at scale without needing VC money anymore. Today it's doable. It wasn't doable 4 or 5 years ago. One of the key paradigms that's changing is that when it was bad to spend money on an app 3 or 5 years ago, a lot of the food delivery businesses, car sharing businesses have helped us build a habit of actually spending money from our phone. 5 years ago, if I asked you, you were probably spending $10 a month max, and that's because you are a social founder and needed to buy a few apps. Today, if I ask you, how much money do you spend on your phone every day?
Way too much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that's helping consumer founders to actually bill for their products, and we're seeing a lot of good successes through subscriptions. Notably, Sounds was a good example. So yeah, I think that's a route that can work.
Okay, very cool. So what would be your advice for the founders here? So hopefully we'll have a next Zenly in the room tonight.
Several of them. No, I mean, it's always hard to give generic advice, but probably focus on first having a clear understanding of what is my proposition value, what is the reason for the existence of my product, what benefit am I trying to give users. Then build it. That seems obvious. Make sure you focus on retention. Don't look at growth. Until 2 years probably post first launch, there's no point in looking at growth. If you have retention, you'll have growth. So I would definitely focus on that. And before even focusing on growth, I would probably focus on engagement, which we did on the Zenly side. And one of the things that makes us grow faster today is we've increased the good reasons to open our product. Differently to a lot of social products, we don't optimize for time spent. We don't have ads, so there's no good reason to make you spend hours in Zenly. If your session is 20 seconds long, it's that we're doing an okay job. If your session is 40 seconds long, it's probably that we have an engineering problem. Now, the frequency of use, how many times you use it in a given day, is a key thing we're optimizing for, because it means we're useful at different times in your day, and overall that yields into more growth. If you guys use the Zenly 5 times during this conference, the neighbors, the people next to you will see the app, will ask what it is, and there's a higher chance that you end up downloading it. So retention and then engagement, growth will come, and that should not be something you optimize for until you're very big.
And reach out to Jean, don't forget.
Yeah, I think that's clear.
So thank you so much, Antoine.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, let's give a big round of applause to Antoine. So I think we have a little bit more time for Q&A.
Yeah. Does anyone have a question? All right. So I'll give you this mic. This is a throwable mic you can throw to the next person. So don't worry, it's soft. It won't hurt you. You just need to throw it and catch it. Okay? And speak here in the black thing. All right? You start.
Hi. When you're working on solving a problem, how do you know this is a real problem and not just something like look like it's important? And
build a first version and you'll know very soon. I mean, to give you a story about when we started growing, when we did Zenly and understood that there was something serious behind it, I wanted to make sure that every opportunity we had to see a user discovering the product, we could film and use it as an improvement methodology. And so I told the friends that had heard about it, you're not allowed to invite anyone else in our friend group. you're not allowed to even tell them about it. If anyone asks, you don't know what this is, and we're still working on Alert Us. And about 3 months into this big lie was in my group of friends. I arrived at a birthday party. I arrived late because we had a production issue beforehand. Everyone is already there. I passed the door and was on my way to say happy birthday to the person whose birthday it is. And I have a friend that jumps on me and says, "Hey, I'm so tired of this fucking bug. Can you please fix it?" So I start responding to him. I'm like, "How have you heard about this? Why are you telling me about it?" I continue to play the game of I don't know what this is. Within 2 seconds, he's like, "No, come on, you won't get me." And he shows me his viewport, his map of Paris, and he basically had every friend of mine on the app. As I walk my way to the birthday guy, I got probably 10 more bug reports from different friends. It took me 45 minutes to get to him, and so that was a pretty clear signal that we had something that they cared for and that was useful enough for them to not even allow me to say hi to the birthday guy. Thanks. So ship an MVP.
Thank you for your insights. Thank you, Ray, for your questions. When you are a startup, how can you spend years working on a product like without fundraising?
Bootstrap your life. So I mean, I can talk for myself. I didn't want my parents to invest money, and I didn't want them to support me because I felt that not going the traditional way of doing studies and signing at Coca-Cola, Danone, or Procter & Gamble was a decision that wasn't theirs, and so I should basically own it. So in my case, producing parties was my way to bootstrap my own life. The other reality was that my girlfriend was doing well. She was working in finance, so she did pay a lot of bills at a time when I couldn't. And then every single dime that we were getting, and at first it was literally 25K that we would have for 6 months, we would spend on freelancers for design or for engineering, optimizing as much as we could. So we'd make them do mock-ups, and I would do the slicing myself because that was half of the time needed. Sketch was in there, and slicing everything would take hours and hours. I would use my own time to do that and make sure they were paid to just bring the value I couldn't bring. So I would say that, in the end, if I look at our generation, if I look at where is Ray doing awesome things today, and what's the difference between Ray and other founders that were part of our Slack channel 6 or 8 years ago, and that are doing other things today, the difference is resilience. As long as you learn, and that's expected as an entrepreneur, as long as you have the ambition and you're at the right place, like Alice was saying, to actually have the ambition, in the end, the only thing that will block you from success is how many tries you've had. But if you learn faster and do that repetitively, at some point you just end up winning, So in our case, these 4 years of extreme resilience got us to a point where we ended up being the best at our subject. When we started, we were the ultimate newbies, and being totally honest, the first 2-3 years were us doing an MBA in product, entrepreneurship, and all these things with money from the clubs and money from a few business angels that we had told the idea to. So resilience.
All right, thank you very much.
Hi, how do you strike a balance between listening to your users or your testers and having strong convictions?
That's a great question. First thing is, I don't think we've ever implemented directly something coming from a user. If that happens, it's generally that we've been very bad because it means it's obvious. So when people say that something that comes from a user should be used as a signal to something else, I think that's very true. Then how do you do the balance? If we ever have to choose, I would say conviction on our side as most important. However, you do build conviction based on all the signals you have, and so the way we do things at Zenly is we make sure we spend a lot of time with our users. We spend a lot of time using every signal we can have. Twitter tweets in Japanese translated, where initially we would take the tweet, put it on Google Translate, and I would do that myself 300 times a day. Is one of the ways to make sure I have all these incoming signals so that I can build a conviction and take the right decision from there.
Hi. So I have one question for Rhai and one for Antoine. So Rhai, I had you on the phone like 2 years ago. I was working in Canada. I was interviewing for a job for sound as a product manager. And I was curious to know, so what happened to the company now, if that's not too uncomfortable asking. And also for Antoine, so you did ESE, the school where I was, and so you're kind of a rock star in our school. Thinking that someone like sold their company to Snapchat, that's really awesome. Love the product. And so working now as a product manager, I was curious to know, how are your product operations in Zenly? How does it work? And is it true that you only have product designers? So thanks.
So going back to sound, so basically, I think one of the things that I didn't understand back then is that even your investors are part of your team. And I had great investors, but I had not great investors as well, like the other part of it. And unfortunately, I had to shut down the company. And but we can talk a little bit more about that. And about the product manager question, so going back to Antoine.
So yeah, it's true that up until today, we haven't had product managers. The reason for that is it's specific to Zenly, but we were coming back from a time where we were mostly an R&D engineering company. When we spent 2 years optimizing algorithms, we were very far from user needs and product design. And so one of our feelings back then was that by not putting anyone in the middle, in between engineers and designers, we would bring the company faster to product design philosophy. And I think it has worked very well until this point, where the cycle is so short. A designer will hear something from a user in the morning, will design something before lunch, will rebound with an engineer, the engineer will build a POC, and from then we'll iterate and one day launch it. That our engineers are probably more design and product driven than in any other company, and our designers are more engineering aware and understanding than anywhere else. That works very well until our stage. We're about 50 today, and we're starting to think that if we want to grow further than that, then at some point we will need some processes and we will need some kind of order, some organization, and product managers exist for a reason. And so then we'll have product managers. And so we're thinking about our first few hires there. Feel free to come see me if you have an interest in Zenly afterwards.
Thank you. Hey. I have one question, and I would like to have your honest advice on for like a baby startup who's starting and is trying to build a social network and has the opportunity to go in the US, and we're talking about a baby startup here. What would be your advice as far as like, should we go there because we think the environment, the mindset of people is a better fit for the product, for the idea, for the drive? Or would you think, would you say not? What's your thought on that?
I think basically having a company in the Bay today is close to impossible. You would need 15 million in funding to have good engineers, good designers, and a good team in general. However, it's very easy to fake that you're in the Bay. And we haven't discussed that, but Ray, in the same way, would spend a week every other month in the Bay or elsewhere in the US. We did the same thing, and I think that's where we infused ourselves with the drive, the ambition, and the good benchmarks that you have over there. It's also very easy to respond to VCs. Hey, I'm off this week, but want to have coffee next week, and buy tickets the next day. And I did that myself a few times. So I would stay in Paris, where engineering and design talent is much more accessible, and overall, being totally honest, probably also better. I'm not going to make a few friends by saying that, but because we're in a challenger ecosystem, because everyone struggles, because there's no Googles and Facebooks and others, every engineer, every designer in this space has had to fight. And I think that drives your learning curve much better. So I would keep France as a home base for the team. And on your side, I would fly out there very often, including weeks at once. Very early, we had no users, no funding, no nothing. With Alex, my co-founder, we just flew over to Palo Alto, found a room in a Airbnb house. He literally did not have a bed. I had a bed, and he was sleeping in one of these chairs you take on the beach, because we just couldn't afford more. But spending 3 weeks there, making friends, getting invited to drinks with other entrepreneurs, infused us with a lot of good vibes that we brought back. It's also how we met some of our first advisors, including one of the early employees of Evernote, and someone that was an entrepreneur in residence at Greylock back then, because we decided to just take a plane. We arrived there, we had 8 meetings, and we literally had a broken version of Alerta, so we didn't even have anything to demo. We left, I think we had done 2,000 miles in the rental car we had. So basically, we would go from SF to Palo Alto 10 times a day, like back and forth, and we probably did 60, 70 meetings. So spending time over there, definitely useful. Basecamp, probably not today. LA is a different story though. If you're thinking of LA, then there's debate, because talent is more accessible in LA.
Yeah, so a small tip about that, you can also like apply to YC, and then you get like free tickets and free accommodation basically. So that's what we did like a few times. We got the interview at YC, we went to San Francisco, and then we would spend a week there and meet a lot of people there. And that's how we ended up with a US investor as well, and then we spent a few months there, but then we decided to just go back, because at the end it's a lot cheaper and you have to focus on your product, you have to build. But yeah, getting meetings in the US is very easy, everything happens very fast. A week is enough, I would say.
If you're good enough, like Ray, to actually be invited for orals at YC,
but
we were rejected.
No, but so today you're very fortunate, because like I think a lot of people at the family could help you getting the interview. But that's the way to do it. And just having the interview is an excuse to get more meetings there, because everyone wants to preempt deals.
There's Raphael somewhere in the crowd. Ask for him if you're interested by YC, right there. So there's a few founders here that have done YC.
Hi, thanks for the great insights tonight. I'd like to know, what are the key actions a Zenly new user must do within the first week to become a Zenly user for life?
So it's probably the first 2 minutes. I wish we had a whole week, but the reality is, if within 2 minutes these actions aren't done, we're out. The first phase is very simple. There's a few must-dos: giving access to your location, giving your first name, giving your phone number, verifying your phone. These we try to stack early, making sure there's only one required thing per screen. Contrarily to what you'll read online, what we recommend is to actually have more screens with simple things on them. If you think of a user going through an onboarding, he is going through motivational waves, and so when he downloads the app, he actually has peak motivation. Within 10 seconds, he'll notice that the family's Wi-Fi isn't great, and so he'll lose some of that motivation. So as soon as he opens the app following the download, you need to bring the motivation back up. And we try to do that in our onboarding. Once that's done, and it's already very hard, you need to spend a lot of time at the McDonald's again. Once that's done, in our case, it's friending. And if you're building a social network, finding one or several friends, depending on the type of network, will probably be the number one key success factor. The quality of the friend matters, but that's very hard to guess.
So I see a lot of founders struggling with KPIs because basically, yeah, they can track everything, but they don't really know the benchmark. So basically, you have to know your industry and what is the benchmark for your industry. So for Zenly, I would guess that you would look at app opens per day, stuff like that. But it wouldn't make sense for Uber. Yeah, you don't open Uber like 10 times a day. So just be very careful about that as well. And yeah, for a social product, it makes sense to add friends, but it wouldn't for Uber. And usually for social products, when you reach 5 active friends, and then you have like a very good retention usually, then it's a sign of product market fit.
Just rebounding on that, it's one of the things we were struggling with a lot was getting access to benchmarks. Knowing, okay, what is a good retention for our product like Zenly? In the SaaS world, people have a strong incentive to produce content for growth. If you look at Front, Mathilde will publish an article about every subject every 2 days. And so her KPIs are fairly public and you'll get access to that. If you think of the social space, because it's so concentrated, these numbers very often aren't online. However, one of the things that seems stupid but it's true is if you ask the founders, they'll respond. And so happy to tell you off record some of our KPIs and what the right benchmarks should be, and don't hesitate to even reach out. Sure, if you do Kevin at Instagram, Evan at Snapchat, you'll get good answers to these questions too.
One more?
Yeah, so follow up on 2 questions before. So are you more of a build fast, break things, or build fast with stable infra?
It's a struggle. So I would be lying if I even let you think that our infra is stable. JB and Clémence, who lead that at Zenly, haven't slept for a week and hate our cloud provider very much this week. Now, should we try to be good at both? It's essential. And if you think of Zenly itself, anytime our infra has latencies, we see our DAUs flatten. Anytime it takes 2-3 seconds to actually see the live location of your friend, instead of 500 milliseconds, people start to lose the habit of opening Zenly instead of sending a text message. Text messages, even if it takes 20 seconds, is not going to be as precise as the answer you'll get through Zenly. You can predict the time it will take to type it. If the service like Zenly starts lagging, people lose the habit immediately. So it's a struggle between both. Infras now should be a subject that is solvable. Contrarily to retention and other things, infra in France, there are some very big businesses. I'm sure you'll find good resources there.
You were saying it was easier for you to manage a team, a tech team, while being like not a tech person. But how did you do to hire the first developer, like your first tech guys?
Freelance. So very simple. Because we didn't have the cash to make a hire, we focused on what freelancer could solve which need. I mean, I called you how many times asking for an iOS freelance, an Android freelance, and we still regularly, literally, we have a freelance team right now helping us on a new feature, and that comes from Rhai, which I pinged on the subject a few weeks ago. So freelance, I think, is a solution, especially in France, because of the notice period when you leave a job, the 3 months. It's very slow to hire. If you make a mistake, you've basically lost 6 months. 3 months to find the person, 3 months notice period, and then you restart again. So if I ever found a company again, I'll be at first going mostly with freelancers. Also gives you the opportunity to see various people reacting differently at different problems and choose the ones that you fit with the best.
And for how long did you work with freelancers before hiring an intern?
So to this day, like today, today we probably have 10% of our staff that's freelance, and it's some of the discussions we're having with my leadership team, thinking that it's not enough. We actually have hired more, and if I think of the employees that today have become leaders in the team, I think 100% of them started as freelancers. Our CTO, our VP of engineering, Corentin, Cyril Mautier, which some of you might know, which is a good example because he was leading mobile for Capitaine Train, was on my hit list for 5 years, was not responding to emails for a job. At some point, we hired several recruiting agencies and told them, big bonus if you get Cyril Mautier. We really wanted to hire him. He did not respond. Laurent, Corentin, and others went to every meetup where he was speaking so that we could become friends. It took us 3-4 months to bring him for a week of consulting, and then another 6 to 8 months to make him realize that his life would be even better if he was a full-time employee. And so we also use it on people we know we want to work with, but freelance is less of a commitment, you know. Would be like asking someone to marry yourself on the first date.
Yeah, so that's how serious they are about hiring. So you see, again, very focused.
Hi, quick question, like, what do you think about TBH? I don't know if you know this social network. It's basically based on teens. So do you think for the future of social networks, it should be targeting teens, or is there a chance to target, like, I would say, the others?
So first of all, I think they have a founder, Nikita, who's of extreme resilience. And if there's one learning with TBH, is the fact that he ate pasta for 5 years before actually finding success. The second thing is, I wouldn't look at it as, I think they're probably an outlier at a time where the company that bought them was fairly desperate for teens and growth and these kinds of use cases. And the third thing is that I think the numbers that were communicated weren't real numbers. Just like very often, the press likes to improve upon things. Now, are there cool products to build in the teen segment? Definitely. There is one to watch out right now in Paris. I'd look at Yubo. Yubo has sustained growth, extreme retention, people in love with the product. They grow with the product on a personal level, and so I would look at products like Yubo more than TBH, which found growth hacks, and that worked, but had no long-term success or no long-term purpose, as we saw with them basically killing the product a few months after being bought.
Yeah, so be very careful about what you see on the news. So usually, I see a lot of founders wasting time because they think that a company was working because of this feature or that feature because they read it online, and most of the time it's not very true. The numbers might not be true as well. Usually there are growth hacks behind the curtain, so be very careful about that. Otherwise, you will lose a lot of time. And just going back to Yubo, these guys are very, very resilient. I remember when I met Sasha, they were already spending like tens or even hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars a month without raising any money. They were just getting credits at AWS, getting credits at Google, getting credits at Microsoft. These guys are amazing because they really struggled, but at the end, it was resilience.
Comment on fait quand on a un prototype d'application, mais qu'on n'a pas les fonds nécessaires pour aller chercher des freelancers? Et une deuxième question aussi, est-ce que vous aidez les jeunes start-upers qui commencent à développer leurs applications?
Sur la deuxième, bien sûr, au même titre que moi, on m'a beaucoup aidé. J'essaye de répondre à 100% des emails que je reçois et quand c'est possible de trouver du temps pour filer un coup de main. Ensuite, sur la partie comment faire son premier proto, je donnais deux réponses. Moi, quand j'ai démarré, il n'y avait pas d'outil de prototyping. Le seul qui existait s'appelait Balsamiq et il ne marchait pas sur mobile. Et donc j'avais dû hacker la manière de faire un prototype pour faire semblant auprès d'investisseurs qu'on avait un truc qui marchait. Et en fait en dessous c'était un PowerPoint avec des liens hypertextes entre des boutons qui amenaient d'un slide à l'autre, transformés en PDF. Et il y avait une seule app qui s'appelle Goodreader qui lisait les liens hypertextes dans les PDF à l'époque. Mais en fait pouvoir montrer ça et leur dire voilà ce qu'on fait, voilà ce qu'on cherche à faire et ça marche pas encore parfaitement. Pas connecté à un serveur, ça marchait pas quoi, hein, mais ça marche pas encore parfaitement. Ça a suffi pour au départ lever 5 500 €. Et c'est comme ça que nous on a démarré. Ensuite on a fait en sorte de réduire les coûts le plus possible, y compris en allant chercher à l'époque l'école qui explosait c'était Epitech. Aujourd'hui je pense que j'irai toquer chez 42 et je me ferai copain avec une ou deux personnes dans ce qu'ils appellent le bocal. Parce que eux savent qui sont les meilleurs développeurs et lesquels vont être intéressés par un projet comme ça. Tu y arriveras quoi. Ce qui est sûr, c'est que de l'autre côté, je compte sur toi pour faire le MVP avant de me pinguer pour qu'on se voit. Sinon, j'aurais du mal à te faire du feedback.
Ok, donc merci beaucoup Antoine. Je pense que c'est tout pour ce soir. Vladimir me fait un signe, ok. Merci beaucoup, merci encore.
Merci.
Que la famille.